June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. The morning air was thick with salt and dread as waves crashed violently against the gray sand. The horizon burned orange under the rising sun, revealing the dark silhouettes of the Allied armada inching toward the French coast. Inside the landing craft, young soldiers gripped their rifles, their knuckles pale, their breaths shallow, the rhythmic rumble of artillery growing louder with every passing second. But beyond that surf, waiting in the cliffs above, lay a fortress of steel and concrete, a German machine gun bunker, silent, immovable, and deadly. Hidden under layers of earth and camouflage netting, the bunker was more than a structure. It was a beast carved into the land. Its narrow slit eyes, the firing ports, stared coldly toward the sea. Inside, a German MG-42 sat mounted on its tripod, its barrel gleaming under the dim red light. The gunners, their faces streaked with dust and sweat, watched through range scopes as the boats approached, their fingers resting near the trigger, waiting for the command. Then came the thunder. As the first landing ramp dropped, the machine gun erupted a stream of fire that tore through the surf, cutting men down before their boots even touched sand. The echo of the MG-42 rolled like a roar through the cliffs, joined by the crash of mortars and the whistle of incoming shells. For the soldiers on the beach, it was chaos incarnate. For those inside the bunker, it was a mechanical rhythm, efficient, precise, and merciless. Concrete, steel, and gunfire, this was the sound of German engineering turned into terror. A fortress that defied the tides, a weapon that commanded fear. This was not just a defensive position, it was the very embodiment of Hitler's Fortress Europe. And on this morning, it had awoken to meet the invasion head-on. The birth of the German bunker system. Long before the thunder of D-Day, the seeds of Hitler's defensive empire were already being poured into concrete. It was 1942, and the German High Command knew the tides of war were shifting. The victories that once came swiftly were now slowing under the weight of Allied resistance. And so began one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the war, the Atlantic Wall. Stretching over 2,600 kilometers from Norway's icy fjords to the beaches of southern France, this monstrous chain of fortifications was meant to be impenetrable. Hitler envisioned it as the shield of Europe, a wall of bunkers, mines, and artillery that would make any Allied invasion impossible. Construction crews, including thousands of forced laborers, toiled day and night under the watchful eyes of German officers and engineers from the organization tote. The bunkers themselves were feats of brutal efficiency. Built from thick reinforced concrete, some with walls over 2 meters thick, they could withstand direct naval bombardment. Each was strategically placed machine gun nests overlooking beaches, observation posts buried in cliffs, artillery casemates guarding harbors. And deep within them, soldiers lived and breathed war, sleeping on cold bunks beside ammo crates, listening to the ocean crash just beyond the steel doors. Inside these structures, the heartbeat of Germany's defensive doctrine pulsed precision, control, and unyielding firepower. Every bunker was connected to another by hidden tunnels, communication wires, and supply depots, forming a vast underground web of resistance. Even when Allied planes roared overhead, these fortresses remained silent and still waiting for the invasion they knew would come. To Hitler, these bunkers symbolized dominance, proof that Germany could hold the world at bay. But to the men who built and manned them, they were something else entirely. Cold tombs of duty and fear, where daylight was a luxury and silence meant survival. The Atlantic Wall was not just a defense line, it was a statement of power carved into the bones of Europe itself. A warning to every soldier who dared to land on its shores. Engineering the fortress, inside a German MG bunker. Deep within the cold embrace of coastal cliffs and forested ridges, the German MG bunkers stood like silent predators, compact, unyielding, and perfectly engineered for one deadly purpose: to dominate the battlefield. These were not random concrete boxes. They were meticulously designed death machines, every angle and corridor crafted with purpose. Step inside one, and the first thing that greets you is the smell of the metallic tang of oil, gunpowder, and sweat. The walls, 2 to 3 meters thick, are cold to the touch, poured with reinforced concrete mixed to withstand direct hits from naval shells. The air feels heavy, the silence oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the sea or the muffled chatter of soldiers preparing for another long night of vigilance. At the heart of the bunker sits the machine gun emplacement, a narrow steel-framed slit known as the Schartenöffnung. Behind it, mounted on a tripod, the fearsome MG-42 waits for the most efficient killing machine of its time. Its barrel gleams under the dim light of a flickering lamp, its 1,200 rounds per minute rate of fire capable of cutting down entire platoons before they even touch sand. Ammunition belts hang like serpents from the walls, coiled and ready. Each MG crew, typically 4 men, has their tasks down to muscle memory. One fires, another feeds, a third clears jams, and the last reloads magazines. The floor is lined with spent shells, their brass casings glinting faintly in the half-light. The bunker's design leaves nothing to chance. Air vents keep the smoke from choking the gunners. Observation slits allow officers to track enemy movements. Underground cables link the MG nests to command centers kilometers away. Hidden escape tunnels snake into the hills behind narrow, pitch-black routes for retreat should the enemy break through. Every inch of the structure screams efficiency born from German engineering precision and battlefield necessity. From coastal Normandy to the forests of the Ardennes, these bunkers became the backbone of Hitler's defensive doctrine. They weren't meant to move, only to endure, to hold ground even as the rest of Europe burned. When Allied troops finally encountered them, they were shocked. Machine gun nests hidden in concrete, invisible from the air, impervious to small arms fire. Many soldiers described the experience as fighting ghosts in stone. The MG bunker wasn't just a position, it was a fortress within a fortress, a symbol of German ingenuity and obsession with control. And in the battles that followed, these fortresses would turn entire beaches and fields into killing grounds. Baptism by fire, the bunkers faced the Allied invasion. It was the early hours of June 6, 1944 D-Day. The beaches of Normandy lay silent under the gray dawn, the tide creeping in with deceptive calm. Inside the German bunkers overlooking Omaha and Juneau, the machine gunners waited tensely, alert, their fingers hovering near the triggers of their MG-42s. For weeks they had heard rumors of an Allied invasion, but now the horizon itself confirmed it. Out at sea, faint specks began to appear, at first like a mirage, then multiplying into hundreds, then thousands. The entire English Channel seemed alive with movement. Ships, landing craft, and destroyers stretched as far as the eye could see. Through binoculars, the German officers could barely believe it was an armada larger than anything they'd imagined. The baptism by fire was about to begin. Then came the sound of a deep, rolling thunder that shook the earth. Allied naval guns opened fire, their shells screaming across the sky and hammering the coastline. Bunkers shuddered violently as explosions erupted all around. Chunks of concrete broke loose. The air filled with dust and smoke. But the bunkers, thick and immovable, held firm. Their reinforced walls absorbed the fury. Inside, the German gunners braced themselves, coughing through clouds of debris, waiting for the barrage to end. When the bombardment finally ceased, there was silence, only the faint hiss of waves and the ticking of falling dust. Then, through the observation slits, they saw them, Allied landing craft lowering their ramps. Dozens of tiny dark silhouettes began rushing through the surf, rifles clutched, boots splashing in chaos. The German commander barked orders, and with a single motion, the MG-42 roared to life. The first bursts of gunfire ripped through the salty air like a chainsaw. Its deadly rhythm, brrrrt, brrrrt, echoed across the coast. Dozens of Allied soldiers fell before they even reached the sand dunes. Machine gun tracers stitched the beach, tearing through men, sandbags, and landing craft alike. The Americans took cover wherever they could, behind steel obstacles, inside craters, or even beneath fallen comrades. The Germans fired relentlessly, the MG-42 barrels glowing red-hot, ammunition belts feeding endlessly. Inside the bunkers, the gunners could barely hear their own screams over the deafening chatter of the guns. But outside, the Allies kept coming. Wave after wave, landing craft after landing craft. The The sea itself seemed to carry an army that refused to die. Soon the bunkers were under fire. Naval shells whistled overhead, exploding behind the cliffs. Flamethrower teams crept closer. Engineers laid explosives at the base of the concrete walls. The smell of smoke, salt, and burning oil filled the air as fire and shrapnel tore through the openings. Inside one bunker, a German loader screamed as the roof cracked above him. Dust and sparks rained down as a direct hit shook the structure. Yet still, the gunner held his post, his eyes bloodshot, his uniform soaked with sweat, firing until the belt ran dry. 4 hours, the battle raged. Some bunkers were held. Others collapsed into smoking ruins. By nightfall, the once invincible fortress line lay shattered, many of its gunners either buried beneath concrete or taken prisoner. The German MG bunkers, once symbols of dominance and engineering brilliance, had faced their greatest test, the unstoppable force of Allied courage and coordination. The beaches of Normandy were soaked in blood, but the invaders had prevailed. The bunkers, though strong, could not hold back the tide of history forever. The hidden networks, underground corridors and escape routes. Beneath the bunkers, beneath the chaos of battle, lay something few ever saw, a secret world, hidden passageways, tunnels, and escape routes that stretched for miles beneath the earth. These were not just shelters, they were nerves of survival. From the beaches of Normandy to the heart of Berlin, military engineers created elaborate labyrinths. Each tunnel had a purpose: to transport ammunition unseen, to shelter high-ranking officers, or to vanish entire units when defeat seemed near. When Allied bombs rained down, these corridors became lifelines. Messages moved faster underground than on the surface, carried by runners or secret communication lines. Some bunkers even had hidden trapdoors, leading to disguised exits through wells, forests, or even church basements. But these tunnels were also tombs. When air vents collapsed or explosions sealed exits, soldiers were trapped in absolute darkness, waiting, listening, hoping the war above would end before the oxygen below did. Many of these underground networks remain undiscovered. Even today, urban explorers stumble upon forgotten corridors carved into time's silent witnesses to a war that tried to hide beneath the earth. The ground we walk on today carries the secrets of men who dug deep not just into soil, but into history itself. A low hum grows louder as the camera zooms through a tunnel opening, fading to black. The war rooms, commanding the apocalypse. Deep beneath the cities, shielded by meters of concrete and steel, the war was being fought not only on the battlefield but behind closed doors. These were the war rooms, the nerve centers of global conflict, where every move, every strike, and every sacrifice was calculated. From London to Berlin, Moscow to Tokyo, world leaders descended underground to command the apocalypse. In these rooms, silence was as deadly as a bomb. Every tick of the clock could mean the fall of a city or the saving of a nation. In London, Winston Churchill's war room stood as Britain's brain in the storm, a hidden fortress beneath the Treasury building. Here, plans for D-Day were drawn, intercepted messages decrypted, and sleepless nights endured as bombs thundered overhead. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Hitler commanded from his underground Führer bunker, a claustrophobic maze where paranoia replaced strategy. As the war neared its end, the bunker became a tomb of delusion, its walls echoing with the sounds of collapsing dreams and closing doors. While one bunker symbolized resilience, another symbolized ruin. But both told the same story of leaders who sought control when the world above was out of control. Today, these rooms remain untouched, a chilling reminder of humanity's most desperate attempt to master destruction. Every pin on the map, every red line drawn was a decision that altered the course of history and the fate of millions. In the end, the war rooms were not just command centers, they were confession chambers, where leaders confronted the weight of their choices and the terrifying power of human will. The echoes that remain, ghosts of the underground war. Long after the last shots were fired and the world above began to rebuild, the bunkers remained silent, forgotten, buried beneath layers of earth and memory. Deep in the forests of Europe, in the cliffs of Normandy, and beneath the ruins of Berlin, the The concrete hearts of war still pulse faintly with echoes of the past. Rusted gun mounts, shattered doors, and bullet-scarred walls tell stories that history books can only whisper. The air inside is thick with moisture, decay, and something else. It's as if the very walls remember. Visitors who step inside these relics describe the same feeling, an eerie silence that hums like an old machine still running somewhere in the dark. Flashlights catch glimpses of faded writing on walls, orders, names, prayers. The bunkers, once alive with soldiers, maps, and the thunder of artillery above, now lie entombed in nature's embrace. Moss creeps over steel. Roots pierce concrete. What was once a fortress is now a grave not just for men, but for an era of unthinkable ambition and devastation. In France, locals still stumble upon hidden tunnels, labyrinths that stretch for miles, sealed off since the war ended. In Germany, some bunkers have been converted into museums, others left to crumble, their entrances sealed, their secrets locked away forever. And yet, the ghosts remain. Not as apparitions, but as echoes in the clank of a rusted door hinge, the hollow drip of water, the wind moaning through a collapsed passage. Each bunker stands as a haunting monument to the extremes of human invention and how intelligence and madness can coexist in the same breath. Beneath their cold surfaces lies the ultimate contradiction, that these fortresses, built for control, became prisons of fear. The soldiers who once manned the machine guns, waiting for an enemy that might never come, lived with the same dread as those above the ground. The bunkers outlived them, all their silence now the only voice left from a war that changed the world. And as the camera drifts through the narrow halls, the echo of footsteps fades into darkness. The narrator's voice falls to a whisper, the war is over, but the ghosts never left. The forgotten relics, unearthing history beneath our feet. Decades after the fall of the Third Reich, time has done little to erase the scars of its war machine. Beneath fields, forests, and quiet European villages, the remnants of Hitler's bunker empire still sleep buried beneath layers of soil, moss, and silence. Farmers plowing their fields still hear the hollow clang of metal beneath their tractors. Archaeologists and urban explorers descend into these forgotten fortresses with flashlights and Geiger counters, uncovering not just rusted steel and concrete, but fragments of history frozen in time. Every discovery begins with a whisper of a local story, an old war map, or a strange mound on the forest floor. Then come the explorers, armed not with guns, but with cameras and courage. What they find beneath the ground feels like stepping into another world of perfectly preserved rooms where dust lies thick over telephones, helmets, and ration cans. Some bunkers still carry the scent of oil and iron, as if their operators had only stepped out a few hours ago. In one such excavation near the Siegfried Line, diggers unearthed an entire underground barracks, bunk beds still aligned, coat hooks still in place, and faded propaganda posters clinging to damp walls. In another, they found sealed steel doors that hadn't been opened since 1945. Inside, the remains of personal belongings, diaries, cigarettes, photographs, reminders that beneath the machinery of war were young men who laughed, feared, and hoped. But unearthed relics also carry danger. Old explosives, buried ammunition, and chemical residues still lurk inside these forgotten tombs. Experts must tread carefully. One wrong step can awaken the past in the most violent way. Yet, the fascination endures. Each bunker tells a story of desperation, defiance, and ultimately decay. For historians, these structures are not just ruins. They're time capsules of ideology and engineering. For locals, they're uneasy reminders of a dark past beneath their feet. And for the curious, they're doorways into history's underworld where silence speaks louder than any words. Today, drone footage and 3D scans bring these bunkers back to light, revealing networks that stretch for miles, proof of the scale and obsession that drove Nazi Germany's war infrastructure. But as nature reclaims what was once built for destruction, the earth quietly seals the past once more. The narrator's voice fades as the camera pans over a moss-covered entrance, half swallowed by the forest. Some history, he whispers, was never meant to stay buried yet, the ground remembers. The modern explorers, descending into Germany's dark past. In the present day, a new kind of adventurer emerges, not soldiers, not spies, but historians, urban explorers, and documentary filmmakers drawn to the labyrinthine remains of Germany's wartime bunkers. Armed with headlamps, respirators, and digital mapping equipment, they descend into passages that have been sealed for decades, venturing where even time seems hesitant to tread. The air inside is thick with damp dust, and the faint metallic tang of rusted steel a sensory reminder that history is never truly gone, merely hidden. Every step echoes through concrete corridors, amplifying the weight of the past. Walls still bear scratch marks from hurried construction, faded numbers that once marked troop assignments, and graffiti left by soldiers whose names are now lost to history. Explorers shine their lights on munitions crates, communication panels, and control rooms, meticulously documenting each relic as though piecing together a jigsaw of war's human and mechanical machinery. Some corridors lead to surprises: long-forgotten ventilation shafts, narrow escape tunnels, or small chambers filled with personal effects, worn boots, helmets dented from training accidents, ration tins stamped with dates from the war's darkest days. Each item tells a story, a fleeting glimpse of the lives entwined with the bunker's cold, unyielding walls. Photographers capture these moments, juxtaposing the raw human element against the stark geometry of Nazi engineering. Yet, the thrill of discovery is tempered by danger. The floors creak under years of decay, rusted rebar threatens to pierce, and unexploded ordnance sleeps silently beneath the concrete. Explorers move carefully, aware that even a century later, the bunkers guard their secrets jealously. Drones and 3D scanning technology now allow for virtual expeditions, mapping bunkers in incredible detail without risking life or limb. Scholars pore over these models, uncovering hidden patterns in layouts and defensive strategies, learning how engineering, geography, and psychology intertwined in the Third Reich's war machine. For some, these excursions are academic. For others, they are a pilgrimage into history's shadowed corridors. Yet all are united by the same realization: the bunkers are more than stone and steel. They are monuments to obsession, ambition, and the cost of total war. As the team exits a particularly deep bunker, the sun cuts through the trees, and the forest above seems tranquil, almost innocent. But below the earth, the past remains alive, echoing with every footstep of those willing to remember. Unearthing secrets, hidden treasures, and war artifacts. Descending deeper into the German MG bunkers, the explorers' lights reveal more than just concrete corridors. They uncover a hidden trove of wartime relics, each object a silent witness to the chaos and ingenuity of the past. Dust-laden crates, once sealed tight for decades, groan under careful prying, revealing rusted weapons, ammunition boxes, and stacks of communication gear meticulously organized by soldiers long gone. Each artifact tells a story. A scratched helmet bears the initials of a soldier who may have never left this subterranean maze alive. A faded map shows strategic positions along the Atlantic Wall, and ration tins, corroded yet intact, whisper of the long, tense hours of waiting for Allied attacks that would never pause. Small personal items emerge from the shadows: dog tags, letters folded with trembling hands, and even a diary whose brittle pages carry the scent of history itself. The explorers handle them gently, aware that these remnants are fragile bridges to lives consumed by war. Every find sparks both fascination and reflection. These are not just military tools but echoes of the human experience of fear, duty, and survival trapped in concrete and steel. The bunkers themselves seem to guard their treasures jealously. In some chambers, hidden compartments built into the walls reveal caches of weapons and rare ammunition, cleverly stashed away by engineers anticipating the collapse of the Third Reich. Skeleton keys, locks, and secret panels hint at the paranoia that permeated the German military hierarchy, a system designed to maximize both defense and secrecy. Above ground, sunlight may bathe the forest in serenity, but below, the labyrinth hums with history. The explorers document every corner with high-resolution cameras and 3D scanning tools, ensuring that even if the bunkers eventually crumble to time, these secrets will endure in digital form for future generations. Artifacts are catalogued with precision, each piece measured, photographed, and cross-referenced with historical archives. The process reveals previously unknown aspects of Nazi defensive strategy, improvised modifications to machine gun ports, camouflaged escape tunnels, and emergency supply stashes that underscore the blend of ingenuity and desperation in the final years of the war. Amid the dust and shadows, the team pauses to reflect. These hidden treasures are more than curiosities. They are tangible evidence of the scale, complexity, and human cost of the German war effort. Each item, each concealed corner, each artifact is a thread connecting the modern world to a tumultuous past, offering lessons that history, even when buried, refuses to forget. Echoes of battle, stories etched in concrete. As the explorers move deeper into the labyrinthine passages of the German MG bunkers, the concrete walls themselves begin to tell stories. Each scar, each bullet hole, and each impact crater is a silent witness to the chaos that once raged above and below ground. The dim glow of their flashlights reveals not just physical damage but human history etched into the very structure. Crude carvings of soldiers' initials, hastily scratched dates marking months and years of occupation, and small, almost imperceptible drawings of loved ones or hometowns, left behind by men far from home. In certain chambers, the walls are peppered with signs of desperate last stands. Chipped mortar and splintered would suggest that heavy artillery and explosive charges struck the bunkers, yet much of the concrete remains intact, a testament to the meticulous engineering and forethought of German military architects. These fortifications, designed to repel the might of Allied firepower, hold an eerie stillness, their silent endurance amplifying the stories of fear, courage, and tenacity that once echoed within. Even the air carries a weight of memory, dust particles dancing in the beams of light, shifting like tiny specters in the cold, recycled air of these subterranean fortresses. The explorers pause before a particularly pockmarked wall, tracing their fingers along a series of engraved notches that historians later identify as tally marks counting days of siege, rations, or perhaps casualties. Each mark is a reminder that history is not just recorded in books, but in the lived, tactile experiences of those who endured it. Around corners, remnants of firefights remain frozen in time, spent shell casings embedded in concrete, twisted fragments of metal from collapsed weapon mounts, and the charred remains of wooden support beams scorched by fire from desperate defensive actions. The juxtaposition of meticulous engineering with chaotic battle damage narrates a compelling story of human ingenuity challenged by the raw force of war. Even after decades, the bunkers whisper tales of strategy, improvisation, and resilience. The explorers capture every detail, documenting not only the physical traces but also imagining the human experiences behind each mark, the fear, the hope, and the grim determination that defined life inside these reinforced walls. Hitler's final Western hideouts, holding the line. By late 1944, the tide of the war had turned irrevocably against Germany, and Hitler's Western hideouts became desperate fortresses, hastily fortified as Allied forces advanced relentlessly. These bunkers, scattered across the Rhineland and the Ardennes, were a grim testament to the Reich's waning power. Surrounded by dense forests and rugged terrain, each location was carefully chosen to offer concealment and strategic oversight, yet none could withstand the overwhelming Allied assault for long. Inside the cold, steel-reinforced walls, the tension was palpable. Generals and aides moved with quiet urgency, their whispered orders carrying the weight of a crumbling empire. Communication lines rattled with urgent reports of Allied tank columns and paratrooper landings. The corridors were narrow and claustrophobic, filled with the smell of damp concrete, machine oil, and unwashed soldiers who had not seen sunlight for days. Every reinforced door, every steel shutter, was both a barrier and a reminder of the encroaching doom outside. From observation points, one could see the Allies maneuvering with relentless precision, probing weak spots, and coordinating combined arms assaults. Yet the bunker's occupants clung stubbornly to their posts, executing defensive measures with grim determination. Interior walls bore the marks of hurried fortifications, sandbags stacked to absorb artillery fire, wooden braces shoring up weakened ceilings, and scrap metal welded to reinforce gun embrasures. In these final Western strongholds, the human element was as critical as engineering. Soldiers and officers improvised defenses on the fly, redirecting machine guns, camouflaging artillery positions, and rationing dwindling supplies. Each decision could mean life or death, not just for the occupants, but for the few civilians still trapped in the surrounding villages. The contrast between the meticulously planned architecture of the bunkers and the frantic improvisation of those inside highlighted the desperation of the last months of the Third Reich. Despite the fortifications, every passing day brought the sound of distant artillery, the rumble of tanks, and the whistle of incoming bombs. The once pristine command centers now seemed haunted, echoing with footsteps and hushed conversations, and the looming inevitability of collapse hung over every corridor. These Western hideouts, built to be impregnable, became monuments to stubborn resistance, illustrating the final futile attempts of a regime facing annihilation. Post-war exploration and legacy of German Western bunkers. When the guns finally fell silent in May 1945, the sprawling network of German bunkers that had once echoed with the orders of commanders and the crackle of machine guns were left behind silent, empty husks of a fallen empire. In the years that followed, these bunkers became eerie monuments to a war that had consumed a generation. Nature began reclaiming them. Ivy crept up their concrete walls, grass covered the craters left by bombs, and rust corroded the steel doors that had once slammed shut against invasion. For decades, many of these bunkers were sealed off or forgotten, hidden beneath forests, farmlands, and towns rebuilt from the rubble. But explorers, historians, and archaeologists would one day return to these places armed not with rifles, but with cameras, flashlights, and notebooks. As they descended into the damp corridors, they found the relics of desperation preserved in time, faded propaganda posters, spent shell casings, helmets resting on dusty desks, and rusted typewriters still bearing German script. Some rooms remained eerily intact, as though the soldiers had stepped out only moments before. In the Rhineland, the Ardennes, and along the Atlantic coast, entire underground complexes were rediscovered multi-level fortresses carved into rock, equipped with generators, ventilation systems, and intricate escape tunnels. These bunkers were feats of engineering, designed to withstand bombardment that could level entire towns. Yet, their silence now spoke volumes about the futility of the war and the human cost behind their construction. Tourists and historians who visit them today often describe the atmosphere as haunting. The air is heavy with moisture and history, and the faint echoes of the past seem to linger within the walls. Some of these bunkers have been turned into museums preserving artifacts and stories for future generations. Others remain off-limits, dangerous from unexploded ordnance or structural decay, serving as unintentional time capsules of war. The legacy of these bunkers extends beyond their concrete shells. They stand as somber reminders of human ingenuity twisted toward destruction, symbols of both technological brilliance and moral collapse. For Germany and the world, they represent the duality of progress and peril, of how far humanity will go to defend an idea, even when that idea leads to ruin. Today, as sunlight filters through the cracks of once impenetrable walls, the bunkers no longer guard soldiers or weapons, they guard memories. They remind the world that every war, no matter how fortified or justified, eventually ends in silence, leaving behind the ghosts of those who once believed themselves invincible.